I still remember the jolt of nerves that morning when I first opened my dresser drawer to find them tucked beneath an old flannel shirt. It was only the third time I had mustered the nerve to bring those soft, lacy briefs out of my closet. I stared for a long moment, my breath catching in my throat as I listened for any hint of movement from my roommates. Nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator echoed from the hallway. That sense of quiet somehow amplified the moment for me, made every second feel like it mattered. My heart beat so hard that I could hear it pulsing in my ears. Still, I couldn't resist. I slipped them on, carefully, feeling the delicate fabric brush against my skin. Right then, it was the only thing that made sense to me. My name is Logan, I'm 28, and I've been working construction for almost a decade. It's honest work, laborious, and sometimes relentless. People see me and assume I'm just another roughneck, a guy who's always got a coil of rope in one hand, a hammer in the other, ready to trudge through the mud and sweat of the day. And that's mostly true. My hair is cut short so it doesn't get in my way when I'm on site. My face is usually peppered with a bit of stubble, and my shoulders are broad from years of hauling and lifting. At first glance, I blend right in with the rest of the crew, who wave off scrapes and shrug at sprains because that's the job. That's what's expected. No one even suspects that underneath my jeans, I'm wearing something that would leave most of them scratching their heads. No one suspects that each morning, right before I yank on my work boots, I gently pull on a pair of women's lace briefs. I live in a small rental house with two guys I've known since high school, Brett and Jordan. We split the rent, which is pretty steep for our area, and we do our best not to get in each other's way. They're good fellas, if a bit rowdy and oblivious to anything that doesn't directly involve them. We keep the place clean enough to get by. Dishes might pile up until someone snaps, but mostly we manage. I make sure to keep my personal laundry hidden in a bag within my closet. I don't know what they'd say if they found it, but the idea of that confrontation makes me sweat more than any summer day on the job. Every morning I head out by 6. The sun is barely up and the roads are quiet. I like that time of day. The sky is streaked with orange and pink, and there's this hush as the world transitions into motion. On this particular morning, my stomach was in knots. As I tugged on my pants, the delicate fabric beneath felt like a secret handshake only I knew. There was a certain odd relief in it, like I could hold a piece of calm inside me no matter how chaotic things got at work. By the time I reached the site, a new office building going up on the outskirts of town, I was already geared up mentally for another day of hauling steel beams, mixing concrete, and dealing with the never-ending clamor of drills and saws. Wayne, the foreman, was perched on a large stack of lumber, sipping coffee. Wayne is in his early 50s, with a weathered face from decades under the sun. He has a direct way of speaking, and he doesn't mince words. "Logan, you're on painting and plaster duty," he called, tossing me a clipboard. "I need the 4th floor paneling done by lunch if possible." I caught the clipboard and nodded. "Sure thing," I replied. My voice felt steady, though inside I was still buzzing from the morning's decision. At that moment, it was almost absurd. I was already splattered with concrete dust on my boots, my jeans were scuffed, and yet I was hyper-aware of the gentle lace hugging my thighs. Over the course of the day, I slipped into my usual work rhythm. The whine of power tools, the rhythmic clang of metal, and the chatter from the radio became a blanket of noise that kept me focused on the physical task. My mind roamed in the quieter moments, though. I couldn't help but think about how odd it was, but also how needed it felt. It didn't change who I was on the outside, didn't switch my taste in who I liked or how I did my job, but it gave me a sort of internal shield. Whenever the stress of a botched measurement or a short-tempered coworker hit, I'd remember that lace beneath my jeans, and I'd feel something like tranquility. At lunch, the guys from my crew spread out in the half-finished rooms or around the trucks. Nobody wanted to linger outside in the scorching sun. I joined Rick and a couple of others in the shade of the unfinished staircase. They were devouring sandwiches, passing around a greasy paper bag of fries. Rick is a few years older than I am, with arms like tree trunks. He's a decent guy, not as loud as some of the others. He always seems to have an eye on everything, though, as if waiting to notice what's off-kilter. "So, how's your day going, man?" Rick said with a half-smile. I shrugged. "Not bad. Got the base coats done on the interior walls." He nodded, taking a swig of water. "Ever just zone out when you're doing it? Painting. Not sure why, but it always gets me thinking." Thinking. Right. I forced a little grin. "I guess I do sometimes," I said. But then Wayne usually starts barking about some measurement, and I'm pulled back real quick. The talk drifted to weekend plans. Brett and Jordan were hosting a poker night soon, and Rick teased me about always folding too early. I chuckled, my mind far from poker. Sitting there, I could feel the texture of the lace, and my thoughts strayed to whether it might show if I stood up wrong or if my shirt lifted too high. I was extra mindful whenever I reached up for something, but no one suspected a thing. The conversation flowed like it always did. Sports, random jokes, complaints about Wayne. When the day wrapped up, I drove the half-hour back to the house. My lower back ached from lugging supplies. I wanted nothing more than a long shower, but I was also petrified that Brett or Jordan might be around, rummaging in the bathroom, or noticing something in my hamper. So I timed my arrival to their schedules. Brett typically joined a friend for a post-work beer, and Jordan had an evening gym routine. Perfect. By the time I got home, the place was empty and still smelled faintly of microwaved leftovers. I went straight to my room, changed into fresh clothes, regular boxers this time, and tossed the lace pair into the discreet laundry bag. Even that small act felt like I was tiptoeing through a minefield. The tension ratcheted up whenever I remembered that one careless slip could blow the whole secret open. Later that night, we were all in the living room, each of us nursing a beer and half watching a rerun of a detective show. Jordan was glued to his phone. Brett was flipping through a sports magazine. Meanwhile, I was replaying the day in my head. The more I thought about it, the more I felt an odd sense of relief. Nobody had noticed a single thing out of the ordinary. That gave me confidence. But it also reminded me that the real challenge was with me, because this wasn't just a stray whim. It was something that had been creeping into my mind for a while, something that took hold whenever I felt suffocated by the expectations around me. I carried on like that for a few more weeks. Each morning, I'd slip on a pair of lace briefs I'd carefully purchased online in a discreet shipment. I'd keep them hidden behind a few old jackets in my closet until I was sure no one was around to ask questions. Then I'd walk out the door, my lunch pail in hand, the same stoic look on my face. At work, Wayne shouted orders. I followed them. We hammered, we measured, we painted, we broke for lunch, and hammered some more. My routine was straightforward, and the guys never suspected anything. If they did, they never said it out loud. I started to find small joys in an otherwise grueling day. Even the harsh clang of steel was more bearable when I had that gentle reminder that I had a corner of softness to call my own. Eventually, though, that sense of safety and secrecy was tested. One afternoon, we were moving massive plywood boards off a delivery truck. The temperature soared past 90, and the site felt like an oven. We all ended up drenched in sweat. Rick turned to me, exasperated. "Lo, you look like you could pass out, man," he said, tossing me a bottle of water. "Come on, let's catch a break. Wayne won't mind if we cool off in the shade for 5 minutes." I cracked open the water, and we stood behind the trailer. Rick peeled his soaked t-shirt away from his chest. I tugged at the waistband of my jeans, trying to relieve a bit of the heat. That was when Rick's gaze flickered down, just for a moment. Something in his expression changed, as if he'd picked up on something he couldn't quite make sense of. I felt my spine stiffen. "You okay?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yeah," he said slowly, his brow furrowing. "I thought I saw something. Guess it was nothing." I swallowed hard, forcing out a casual chuckle. "Probably my tank top," I lied, pulling the collar of my sweaty shirt in demonstration. "You're seeing things." "Probably," he echoed, but his eyes still lingered a moment longer than I liked. Then he shrugged. "Anyway, I'll tell Wayne we might need a few more guys for the next load. No point exhausting ourselves when there's other help on the site." I nodded, relieved, though the nervous hammering of my heart stayed for the rest of the day. That was the first time anyone even hinted at noticing something unusual. I replayed that small moment in my head countless times, making sure I hadn't let anything slip, that my underwear wasn't peeking above my jeans. Maybe it was just the glare of the sun or the trick of sweat. Even so, I began triple-checking that my shirt was tucked in properly every day. A week or so later, I got a call from my dad. Marcus had spent most of his life working at a tractor supply shop, selling farm machinery. He was old school, a man of firm handshakes, quick jokes, and short tempers when it came to anything he considered out of the ordinary. I had never once considered telling him what I'd been up to. The idea itself made me sweat. "How's the job site, kid?" he asked, voice crackling over the line. "Your mom was asking if you might swing by soon. We got your old room fixed up for you if you want to crash for a weekend." My parents lived a few towns away, in the same home I grew up in. I visited as often as I could manage, but with construction hours and the overtime pay I craved, it wasn't as frequent as they liked. "I might have time this Sunday," I told him, picturing the narrow streets of my hometown. "We've got a finishing job on Saturday, so I'll see how tired I am after that." He grunted affirmatively. "Bring an appetite. Your mom's been trying new recipes. She's real proud of them." I couldn't help but smile. My mom, Helen, had taken a cooking class at the local community center. That was probably the biggest excitement she'd had in a while. We chatted a few minutes more before hanging up. While I missed my parents, the idea of staying overnight, sleeping in my old room, and having them near my stuff twisted my stomach in knots. I imagined the look on my dad's face if he accidentally stumbled on lacy underwear in my duffel bag. When Sunday came around, I decided to make it a day trip. I arrived in the late morning, grabbed lunch with them, and politely declined to stay over. I could see the disappointment on their faces. Still, it was better than the risk. Dad asked me about my life, if I was dating anyone. Mom asked if I was eating well. I gave them short, simple answers. They didn't push too hard. On the drive back, I couldn't shake the sense that I was living a double life. The thought brought a mix of relief and heaviness. I turned up the radio to drown it out. At work, Wayne handed me more responsibilities as we pushed to meet a tight deadline. I spent 1 week on framing, another on interior tiling. My days blurred into each other. The only moments of sharp relief were those early mornings when I'd slip on a new pair of lace briefs, or evenings when I'd do laundry in secret. Even the smallest errands, picking up groceries, grabbing coffee, took on a different flavor. I'd walk through aisles of cereal and find myself reaching, by habit, to check that my t-shirt was neatly covering my waistband. Every time I realized no one else knew, I'd feel a rush of odd comfort. In the meantime, the guys started noticing little changes about me. Brett commented that I seemed less stressed, and Jordan joked that maybe I'd found an unlikely hobby, like crocheting. They were teasing, of course, but I could only nod and shrug, giving cryptic answers. In truth, I was a bit calmer. The knowledge that I had this pocket of softness, this private choice, gave me a cushion against the everyday grind. It didn't transform me into a different person, but it allowed me to walk with a strange sense of quiet confidence. One evening, I hung back at the construction site after most of the crew left. The orange glow of the setting sun turned the half-finished walls into silhouettes. The place was silent, except for the distant hum of traffic. I wasn't in a rush, so I took a walk through the deserted corridor on the second floor. Unpainted drywall, scattered tools, dusty floors. I ran a hand along the wall, imagining how it would look when finished. For some reason, my mind drifted to the idea of one day exploring more than just lace briefs, maybe wearing a light blouse or a simple skirt at home. I caught myself before the fantasy went too far. The idea felt bigger than I was ready for. Still, it whispered in the back of my mind, reminding me that my secret wasn't necessarily the end. It might just be the start of something more. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Rick carrying a couple of folded tarps. His expression was curious. "What are you still doing here, man?" he asked. "Wayne told everyone to clear out." I forced a casual grin. "I was just checking on the plaster work in the hallway," I lied, tapping the wall. "Figured I'd see if it needed a second coat." He nodded, though his eyes scanned me with that same thoughtful look I'd noticed before. "You, want to ride home? My truck's still here." I shook my head. "Nah, I'll be good. I drove in too." We walked outside together, the air cooler now that the sun was nearly gone. Standing by our vehicles, he hesitated. "Hey, Logan," he said softly. "I don't mean to pry, but is everything all right? You've been different lately. I don't know, calmer, quieter. Used to be you and me would gripe about everything. Now you just let a lot slide." My chest tightened at how perceptive he was. I debated how to answer. "I've been handling a lot in my head, that's all," I said, hoping that was vague enough. He studied my face in the dimming light. "All right," he replied, nodding slowly. "Just know if you need to talk. I'm around. That's all." I thanked him, then watched him drive off. His brake lights disappeared down the gravel road, and I couldn't tell if I felt relieved or uneasy. Rick was a good friend. Maybe under different circumstances I'd confide in him. But the truth felt too big, and I feared it might change everything. Weeks went by, and the building's structure neared completion. Wayne was in top form, barking orders and hurrying us along to finish each phase on schedule. We had to pull in extra hours on Saturday. On that particular Saturday afternoon, I caught sight of a wire out of place in one of the walls. The electrician had told us it was the correct wiring for the planned lighting system, but it didn't match the blueprint I'd double-checked. I sought out Wayne, but he'd left for the supply store. So I had no choice but to go searching for someone else who might confirm. I found Rick rummaging in the tool chest. "Hey, got a minute?" I asked, showing him the blueprint. "This wire's off by about 6 inches from the plan. Should we reroute it, or is that an approved change?" Rick shrugged. "Haven't heard any changes. Might be the electrician just took a shortcut. Let's do it right. Grab the wire cutters, we'll fix it." We spent the next hour sorting it out. The hallway was cramped, so we worked practically shoulder to shoulder. Every time I shifted, I was keenly aware of the lace brushing my hips. It was hot, we were both sweaty, and I started to worry about the waistband riding up or showing. When we finally finished, I wiped my face with the back of my arm. Rick stretched his neck, then turned to pick up the tools. For one terrifying moment, I felt the back of my shirt lift, and a cool breeze hit my lower back. I yanked my shirt down instantly, heart pounding. Had he seen anything? Rick's face was neutral, though he did glance at me strangely. My pulse hammered in my ears. We packed up quietly, and neither of us mentioned anything. But as I walked off to find Wayne, I couldn't help thinking that Rick was just a step away from suspecting something. In the mirror of the site's portable bathroom, I checked my reflection. My face was red from the heat, and I looked as average as any other tired construction worker, except for that secret I carried. That evening, I collapsed on the couch at home, exhausted. Brett and Jordan had gone out, so the house was quiet. I placed a takeout box of fried rice on the coffee table and half-heartedly switched on the TV. My mind, though, was on that close call. It seemed like each passing day brought more opportunities for me to be discovered. I had never considered what I'd do if someone flat out asked me about it. Would I deny it? Would I try to lie my way out? The whole situation felt like a careful dance on the edge of a cliff. The next day was Sunday, and I had a rare day off. I slept in, relishing the cool sheets, then took a quick shower. By early afternoon, I decided to get groceries before the week started. The supermarket was bustling with families and couples. I caught glimpses of people shopping together, laughing, bickering over produce. It was normal life. Seeing them made me feel like I was on the outside looking in. I grabbed milk, eggs, bread, the usual. Then, on a whim, I found myself in the lingerie aisle near the back. My heart thrummed as I passed a display of lacy underwear. In a blink, I almost reached out, but my hand froze. A couple walked by with a cart, and I quickly stepped away, pretending I was just looking for cleaning supplies. I gave them a polite nod, then moved on, face warm. It reminded me how delicate the balance was between my normal everyday persona and that hidden side. Later that afternoon, I sprawled on the couch once more, flipping through channels without paying attention. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rick. "Hey man, you free? I'm in your area." I stared at the screen, unsure. Before I could finish thinking, another text came through. "Figured we could shoot some pool or hang out for a bit." I typed back a quick reply. "Sure, come on over. I'm just being lazy at home." 20 minutes later, Rick's pickup rumbled to a stop in front of the house. I met him at the door, ushering him inside. The place was a little messy: Brett's pizza box from last night, Jordan's protein shake cups. Rick scanned the living room and smirked. "Nice bachelor pad," he teased. I laughed. "Yeah, we keep it classy." We settled on the couch. Rick cracked open a soda, and I sipped on a bottle of water. The conversation ambled over standard territory: new sports scores, the ridiculous hours Wayne was demanding, which coworker had the worst jokes. But then Rick paused, his expression shifting to something more serious. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, setting his soda can on the table. "You've been pretty closed off lately. Not in a bad way, but you seem like you've got a secret." My stomach lurched. I tried to keep my face even. "A secret? Nah, just been tired, man." He studied me for a moment, then shrugged, deciding not to push too hard. "All right. If it's not my business, I won't pry." We ended up playing a video game for a while, trash-talking each other's skills. Then he left. After he was gone, I let out a long breath. My mind circled the same question. Should I confide in Rick? Could I trust him? The idea scared me so much that I had to distract myself with chores just to stop overthinking. A few more weeks slipped by. Fall started to creep into the weather. Mornings were cooler, and the leaves in my neighborhood began to shift to shades of yellow and orange. Our construction site pushed onward, with the building's interior now nearly complete. Wayne was working us to the bone, but the end was finally in sight. One day, as I was wrapping up some painting in a corridor, I overheard a conversation from the next room. Two of the guys were chatting about someone they knew outside of work, a cousin or a friend, who apparently dressed in a way they considered strange. Their comments were tinged with mockery. They laughed, tossing around stereotypes. My chest tightened, and I found myself gripping the paint roller too hard. It was a reminder that not everyone would be cool with my secret. In fact, many might be downright cruel about it. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying the guy's words. Anxieties piled on. I tried to remind myself that nobody knew about my daily choice, that it was my own private matter, but that didn't stop the dread of being discovered and ridiculed. It became a silent tug-of-war inside me. On the one hand, I hated having to hide something that brought me quiet comfort. On the other, I dreaded the reactions of people I spent most of my waking hours with. One particularly rough week, we were finishing the top floor's drywall. Dust clogged my nose, and the endless overhead work made my arms burn. My sleep schedule was off, thanks to too many early mornings and late nights. Rick was in the middle of it too, measuring for window frames. Midway through the shift, Wayne hollered for me to go help unload a shipment of cabinets on the ground level. I headed for the stairs at a quick clip. My foot caught on an uneven step, and I stumbled forward, smacking my knee into the corner of a step. Pain shot through my leg, and I gasped, falling onto my side. My shirt rode up from the tumble, and I was instantly terrified about what might be visible. I heard footsteps thundering toward me. Rick got there first, kneeling down. Hey, you okay?" he asked, concern etched in his face. I gritted my teeth, sitting up. "I'm fine," I muttered, wincing as I tested my leg. It hurt like hell, but I'd survive. "That's gonna bruise," Rick said, steadying me by the shoulders. But his eyes flicked down. We both noticed my shirt was halfway up my torso. At that moment, the top band of the lacy briefs must have been in plain view. Rick didn't say anything, but there was a distinct flicker of surprise, maybe confusion, in his expression. My entire face felt hot. A wave of panic rushed over me. I yanked my shirt down hastily. "I'm good," I repeated more gruffly, hoping to bulldoze right past what had just happened. He helped me to my feet. I tried to stand like nothing was wrong, but my knee buckled slightly. "Let me help you to the brake trailer," he insisted. His tone left no room for argument, so I nodded, swallowing all my anxiety as we hobbled together across the site. Inside the trailer, he had me sit on a fold-out chair. He grabbed an ice pack from the small freezer and held it out. "You want me to?" he began, before trailing off. I took the ice pack and placed it on my knee, grateful not to have him fuss. Neither of us mentioned the brief glimpse of lace. Rick lingered by the door, as if he wanted to say something else but wasn't sure how. I forced a dry laugh. "Thanks for the rescue. I owe you one." He gave a silent nod. "Guess we all trip once in a while," he said quietly. Then he stepped out, letting the flimsy door close behind him. The rest of the shift, I went through the motions on autopilot, my mind consumed with the realization that Rick definitely saw something. I couldn't read exactly what was on his face. Surprise, maybe a little curiosity, but not overt judgment. Still, it might be only a matter of time before I got cornered, or worse, word spread among the crew. The dread coiled in my stomach. At the end of the day, I limped to my truck. My knee felt swollen, but I was more worried about what would happen the next time I saw Rick. I drove home, thinking of plausible stories. Could I claim they were my girlfriend's underwear, and I'd accidentally put them on in the dark? That sounded absurd. Could I pretend it was some random gag? It all felt so flimsy. When I got home, Brett and Jordan were in the kitchen microwaving leftovers. They took one look at my limp and asked if I was all right. I gave them the short version. Then I retreated to my room, anxious about how everything might unravel. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I arrived at the site slightly earlier than usual, forcing myself to maintain routine. Rick showed up a bit after I did, nodding at me as he set down his tool belt. The tension was palpable. We worked in near silence. Wayne, oblivious as ever, gave us a laundry list of tasks. We spread out, me in one hallway, Rick in another. Occasionally, we'd cross paths, exchanging only curt nods. As the hours wore on, I found it hard to keep ignoring the inevitable. During a lull, I spotted Rick alone, reorganizing some leftover trim pieces. Summoning courage I didn't quite feel, I walked over, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Hey," I said, forcing a casual tone. He looked up, meeting my eye without flinching. "Hey." I rubbed a hand across the back of my neck, trying to play it cool. "About yesterday," I began, each word feeling heavier. "I appreciate you helping me, and, that thing you might have seen." He stopped me, raising a hand gently. "It's none of my business," he said. "I'm not here to judge, Logan. But you want to talk about it?" My stomach flipped. His voice was calm, not mocking. I started, then realized I didn't have a rehearsed speech. "It's something that helps me feel like I can handle everything." I struggled to keep my voice level. "I guess it's weird, but it's not hurting anyone. And it helps." Rick nodded, exhaling slowly, relief spreading over his features as if he'd been bracing for me to deny it. "All right," he said. "I won't pretend to understand it fully, but if it helps you get through the day, that's your call." I blinked, half disbelieving. "So, you're not going to tell the guys?" He frowned. "Why would I do that? People have their own ways of finding comfort, right? I don't see the point in broadcasting it." My shoulders relaxed so quickly, I nearly laughed from sheer relief. "Thank you," I said softly. "I know it might not make sense." He placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. "Doesn't have to make sense to me, just be careful. There are some guys on the crew who might not be so understanding." A corner of my mouth turned up in a tiny smile. "I know. I plan to keep it under wraps." Rick nodded, and we went back to work. For the rest of the day, we settled into a more natural rhythm. He even cracked a few jokes about my slow limp, which I took as a sign that he wasn't treating me any differently. The tension I'd been lugging around started to lift. Later, as we were finishing up, he turned to me and said, "You should really ice that knee again tonight, man. Don't make me carry you around the site." Yeah, I teased back, rolling my eyes dramatically. "Don't worry, I'll be good by tomorrow." During the drive home, I replayed our conversation in my mind. It still felt surreal to have someone else know about my secret, but the fact that he hadn't scorned me or called me names was a revelation. It made me wonder if, all this time, I'd been building up an impenetrable wall of dread. Not that I was going to broadcast it to everyone, no way, but at least one person knew, and the world hadn't ended. That night, I found a small measure of calm that hadn't been there before. After my shower, I pulled on a fresh pair of lacy black briefs, let out a breath, and realized the knots in my stomach were less intense. If Rick was on board with keeping this quiet, maybe I could stop tiptoeing quite so anxiously around the house, at least in terms of my own mindset. I still kept the same hiding spots and locked my door when I changed, but my paranoia decreased. It was progress in its own silent way. A few days later, Rick and I were assigned to an outbuilding near the main structure, installing fixtures. For a while, we worked without any friction. Then, during our lunch break, we ended up alone, sitting on a couple of overturned buckets by a half-installed window. He took a bite of his sandwich and glanced at me. "You know, I had a cousin," he began quietly. "She was always real artsy, liked to do things her own way. A lot of my family didn't get it, and they'd poke fun sometimes. But she stuck to what felt right for her. She ended up going to art school, living on her own terms." I studied him, unsure why he was telling me this, but grateful to sense no malice in his tone. He shrugged. "You remind me a bit of that, I guess. Doing something most people wouldn't expect. Doesn't mean it's wrong, just means some folks won't understand." I let out a long breath, nodding. "Thanks," I said. I guess I just never wanted to be singled out. But it's not like I can ignore it either. Rick gave a knowing hum. Best thing is probably to keep it low-key around here. But if you ever need a friend who knows, I got you. Those words landed in my chest like a small, reassuring weight. I felt an urge to say more, maybe express the swirl of emotions I'd been wrestling with. But the moment felt fragile, so I simply nodded and changed the subject to the schedule for the following week. Still, I carried his words around like a shield. The next month or so was the final push for the building's completion. We were painting, installing finishes, and cleaning up. The foreman hopped from floor to floor, snapping at anyone who wasn't meeting the deadlines. Rick and I weathered the storm by picking up the pace, finishing tasks quickly, and ignoring Wayne's bristly attitude. Despite the stress, I was more at ease internally than I'd been in ages. There was a difference in having even one ally who knew about this hidden side of me. We'd exchange brief, loaded glances whenever the rest of the crew joked about real men or made passing remarks that stung. We never said anything out loud, but I knew he had my back. By the time we wrapped the site for the official inspection, Wayne congratulated us on a job well done, grumbling a bit less than usual. The building looked polished enough for the new tenants to move in soon. Our entire crew breathed a collective sigh of relief. After that, we were granted a couple of days off before starting a new project. On my first day off, I went for a drive with no destination in mind, just letting the open road calm my thoughts. At a deserted stretch near the outskirts of town, I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, hopped out, and walked a short distance into a field. The sun was bright overhead, the wind carrying the scent of dry grass. I glanced around, seeing no one. Then, in a moment of quiet audacity, I lifted my t-shirt to reveal the lace briefs I had on underneath my jeans. I didn't take my jeans off or anything that dramatic, just let the sun and breeze hit my midsection for a moment. A private second, with no watchers, no judgment, just me. It was small, but it felt freeing in its own raw way. Back in town, I grabbed a coffee and thought about the new project scheduled to start next week. I realized that from here on out, as long as I worked in construction, there would always be the risk of close calls and misunderstandings. But I also realized that I was not alone. Rick knew, and he didn't despise me for it. That knowledge made the days easier. Maybe I'd always have to keep a tight circle, maybe even just me and him, but that was more than I ever imagined when I started wearing lace briefs. On the final morning before the new job began, I found myself awake earlier than usual, sipping coffee at the kitchen table while the sky slowly brightened. I thought about my parents, who still had no clue. I thought about Brett and Jordan, who remained content in their ignorance. And I thought about the possibility that one day I might try on a dress or put on a wig. I felt that swirl of curiosity again. Maybe not soon, maybe not ever in front of anyone else. But it was there, gently tugging at the back of my mind. The new project was a smaller one, a pair of duplex homes across town. The crew was smaller too, mostly a mix of old and new faces. Rick and I stuck together. People joked that we were joined at the hip, but we didn't mind. One afternoon, we were installing new windows. During our break, we sat on a small bench near the portable toilet, the only shade around. Rick glanced at me between sips of water. "Guess the next site will be more of the same, huh?" he said. Another group of guys, another round of jokes, another foreman or two. "Yep," I said, exhaling. "But I think I can handle it." He gave me a sideways grin. "I'm sure you can." A breeze kicked up dust across the lot, making us squint. Once it passed, Rick cleared his throat. "I was thinking," he started, "if you ever need to crash somewhere else, or if you need an excuse not to go home to your roommates, my door's open. I live alone, so no risk of someone snooping. Might make life a little easier." I looked at him, touched by the offer. "Thanks," I replied. "I'll keep that in mind. Right now, I'm managing fine, but it's good to know." He nodded, and we fell into a comfortable silence. A car passed in the distance, stirring up more dust. The rest of the day was unremarkable. A few misaligned panels, some supply delays. But inside, I carried a sense of connection I hadn't felt before. Rick didn't have to do that. He could have kept his distance. The fact that he was still in my corner meant more than I knew how to say. When the sun dipped below the trees, we packed up for the day and drove off the lot. My knee ached from old bruises. My arms felt like lead from carrying heavy boxes of nails, but I was oddly content. At home, Brett and Jordan were in the middle of a loud argument about whether to buy a better TV or spend the money on a new couch. I slipped by them, heading to my room, feeling a pang of relief that my life outside these walls was, for once, a bit less stressful than inside. I checked my phone. There was a message from my dad, reminding me that a family gathering was coming up next month. I'd have to figure out the logistics, but for now, I set it aside. That evening, after my shower, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the short hair, the calloused hands, the broad shoulders, the faint outline of stubble on my jaw, and beneath the towel around my waist, a small hint of lace peeked out. It was a jarring contrast, but I found a subtle reassurance in it. My outward shell might always look a certain way, gritty, tough from the job, but there was something else under the surface, something softer that I chose for myself. The weeks rolled on, and the duplex project moved steadily forward. With each new stack of lumber or set of instructions, I'd slip deeper into the day's routine. But I always felt that gentle brush of lace when things got too hectic. Sometimes Rick would catch my eye during a coffee break, giving me a small nod that told me everything was fine. We never delved into heavy discussions about it, and I never gave him details beyond that one conversation in the corridor. But a single friend who knew was enough to diffuse a mountain of tension. I started to treat myself to a couple new pairs of briefs, each with different lace patterns, carefully ordered online and hidden away in plain packaging. Whenever I opened them, I felt the same surge of excitement and nerves as when I first started. I made sure to rotate them so none got worn out too fast. After all, these were precious in their own quiet way. Occasionally, thoughts of wearing other items crept in. I'd see a blouse in a store window or pass by a skirt on a mannequin and wonder what it might feel like to pull that fabric on, just for a few minutes. But I also recognized that I wasn't ready to go that far, not when the stakes felt so high. For now, the briefs were my private anchor, a small form of quiet rebellion in a world that demanded I show only one kind of masculinity. One Saturday evening, my roommates threw a small party. A few co-workers, some of Brett's friends, a couple of Jordan's gym buddies. Rick showed up, and we exchanged a grin across the living room. Everyone was talking loudly, passing around bottles of cheap beer. I did my usual rounds, making small talk. Then I found Rick leaning against the kitchen counter, half listening to someone's story about an old fishing trip. When that person wandered away, Rick turned to me and said quietly, "You hanging in there?" I smirked. "More or less. You know how these things go. People come, they drink, they leave a mess." He chuckled. "Guess so. You good?" I nodded, appreciating his short way of checking in. In a house brimming with people, we shared a subtle moment of understanding that no one else suspected. Once again, that knowledge eased my mind. Later, as the party wore down and the living room was littered with cups and snack wrappers, Rick helped me gather trash bags. We worked side by side, clinking empty cans together, exchanging tired smiles. By the time he headed home, I felt a sense of gratitude that he was part of my life. The next Monday, Wayne assigned me to manage some basic oversight of the finishing touches on the duplex's interior. It wasn't an official leadership role, but it meant I had to check on the painters and ensure they were matching the correct colors. It gave me a taste of what it was like to be in a more responsible position. Yet another reminder that, outwardly, I was this dependable, hard-working guy, someone the boss could count on. If only he knew the hidden detail that set me apart. A few days later, as we were installing cabinets in one of the duplex kitchens, I heard the hum of a radio. It was an old station playing classic tunes, the kind that the older carpenters enjoyed. I almost found myself humming along, lost in a moment. That's when Wayne strolled in, his boots echoing on the floor. He gave me a thoughtful look, then gestured for me to follow him outside. I braced myself, half expecting some complaint. Instead, he surprised me. "Logan," he started, arms folded. "Been noticing you. You do solid work. You keep your head down, get things done, don't make a fuss." I wasn't sure if this was a compliment or a setup. "Thanks. I try." He nodded toward the houses. "Well, once this is wrapped, we're starting another bigger project near the lake. I'll need someone reliable. Maybe take on a lead role. Pay bump, more responsibilities. You interested?" My pulse quickened. Yeah, definitely. A lead role would mean better money, a step up from standard crew tasks. Wayne gave a firm nod. "All right, I'll keep you in mind. Make sure everything here is smooth for the last couple of weeks. If that goes well, I'll see about putting you in that slot." As he walked off, I felt a surge of pride and nerves. A bigger role meant more eyes on me, more supervision. Would that raise the risk of being discovered? Possibly. But it also gave me a chance to stand on my own. As I headed back to the kitchen, Rick saw the expression on my face and arched an eyebrow. "Wayne chew you out?" I shook my head with a grin. "He's talking about putting me in a lead position at the next site." Rick's eyes brightened. "That's awesome, man. You earned it. Don't sweat the extra attention. Just do your job like you've been doing." I gave him a nod, gratitude welling up in my chest. Having someone say out loud that my abilities were recognized was a big deal to me. We returned to installing cabinets, and for a few hours, I forgot to worry about lace or secrets. I was just Logan, a man shaping a house alongside his friend. The weeks raced by, and soon enough, the duplex project reached its end. The crew cleared out tools, cleaned up scraps, and congratulated each other on a job well done. Wayne made good on his word, confirming that I'd be stepping into a small leadership role for the new site. I was equal parts excited and nervous, but I threw myself into preparations, reading up on the project details, ensuring I understood the timeline, the budgets, and the crew assignments. On a bright Monday morning, I arrived at the new location, a prime piece of land near a lake. The plan was to build several cabins that would eventually serve as vacation rentals. The air was crisp, filled with the smell of pine trees. Wayne introduced me to some of the new hires. Rick was there too, giving me a supportive smile from behind Wayne's shoulder. "All right," Wayne grumbled. "Let's see if you can handle this." He handed me a folder, thick with schedules and building plans. I nodded, doing my best to look confident. Inside, that old swirl of nerves rose up. But there was something else too, an excitement about forging ahead, stepping into a more prominent role, and carrying my hidden softness with me wherever I went. Because no matter how many cabins we built, how many foremen I worked under, or how many co-workers made jokes, I had found a small piece of calm in those lace briefs. It was mine alone, and it gave me a sense of inner steadiness I couldn't find anywhere else. After Wayne left me with the folder, Rick sidled over, glancing at the papers. "Look at you, big shot," he teased. I smirked. "Let's hope I don't blow it. You'll still be around, right?" He gave me a good-natured slap on the shoulder. Absolutely. You call the shots, I'll swing the hammer. That's how it goes now. We shared a grin, then set about scoping the site, deciding where to place materials. All the while I felt the lace beneath my jeans, a comforting reminder that I didn't have to be just one thing to the world. I could be a hard-working construction lead, the kind of guy who hauled lumber and barked orders, and still hold that hidden softness against my skin. And if someday that developed into something else, like a dress or a wig, I'd handle it when I was ready. For now, it was enough to stand there with the crisp breeze off the lake ruffling my hair, confident that I was as real and honest as I could be in this moment. Sure, I was carrying a secret, but it wasn't a burden. It was a quiet piece of comfort that belonged to me alone. And as the day began in earnest, I found myself smiling in the middle of that dusty lot, ready for whatever challenges came next.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.